Welcome to another podcast. I'm your host, Donna Moulds, and thank you for joining me. If this is your first time joining me, I will share with you I have a background in adult education, training and assessment for a very long time. I have been immersed in personal development for about 23 years. Actually 33 years, and have been delivering training for about 23 years. And the reason for this podcast is for me not to say 100 times, but it's actually for me to share some tips with you around using Zoom for your facilitation when you're delivering. And there's some great little tips that have really changed the trajectory of how my sessions get facilitated. And, in my background, I have delivered training to corporates, to long-term unemployed, and especially in 3 years in a men's maximum security prison, delivering training and managing a team of incredible trainers and assessors who had a very challenging job. But I also always like to keep my skills up to date. So I was also delivering some training in the prison as well. And that also enables me to see firsthand some of the challenges that my team would face and how we overcame those, which we certainly collaborated as a team to work through those. So without any more delay, let me talk to you about why it's really good to have some key things implemented into your facilitation. And let me start by saying the first 5 minutes of your delivery via Zoom are really key. And the reason they're key is because that allows you to set the stage for what's to come and how you want to engage people. It's very easy to be on a Zoom call and have everyone turn their cameras off, everyone's muted. Having people muted while you're delivering is obviously a really good thing to have. However, having the ability for people to engage and contribute to the facilitation process is also really key. And so when I say the first 5 minutes, that's your opportunity to do some really good housekeeping introduction and also engagement, initial engagement, so that your participants are able to see how they can actually contribute. So there's a couple of things that I like to do in the beginning, and that is I ask people, if possible, can you please turn your camera on, because I'd really like to see you. It allows me to engage. It also allows other people to see. And you as a facilitator can also see some facial cues if people aren't resonating with what you're saying. Just like when you're in a room face-to-face facilitation, you can see cues that people have about whether they're engaging with the information or not. And so asking them to turn their cameras on does not always achieve that result, but certainly you can ask. And then also you want to be able to ask where people are calling in from. So where are you tuning in from? That builds a bit of rapport as well. I'm here in Australia or wherever you are, and being able to see that in the chat and then just going, you could be speaking to that. The other thing is, if you have small groups, another great thing to do is, can you introduce yourself and give me a little bit of your background if you don't know anything about everyone's background? Now, obviously, with a large group, that's much harder to do, and I don't encourage you to do that because that can eat into a lot of your time. But for small groups, it's really good to be able to do that. And that can happen in the chat, or that can happen by opening up for people to speak on that. And also you can ask people, what is one thing that you would like to take away from this session? Now, before you ask that question, of course, you want to make sure people know why they're there. So, for example, if I was delivering a session on emotional intelligence, I'm going to say today we're here to learn about emotional intelligence and to be able to use that in your facilitation strategies, but also your emotional intelligence in engaging with people and conversations. So I'm introducing the subject so that people know, hopefully no one who shouldn't be there is there, but it enables you to also then ask that question, what is it that you would like to get from today's session? And so me specifically, I ask, if you could take one thing away from today's session, what would that be? Can you write it in the chat? And I really love to see what some of those answers are. And that enables me to have a look at it. And I'll give you a minute or so to be able to type that in the chat, and we can have a look at that. So sometimes I get some really surprising answers, and but I've never had crickets, right? I've never not had a response to that question. So don't be worried about that. But I'll tell you why it's important. So it works because the adult learning principle really behind it is when learners name what they're looking for from the start, they become an active participant in their own learning, right? They stop waiting for you to deliver something, and they start scanning everything, looking for their answers, right? So this is a self-directed motivation. And if you've ever read any of the work from Malcolm Knowles, he identifies this as a core driver in adult learning. So you're not just opening a session, you're actually activating the learner, which is really, really powerful. So, and I can tell you now, when I have done this in the past, like I said, I have never had crickets from that question. So, but when I've done this from the past, that has actually really reinforced that I'm on the right track with what I'm actually presenting, because I go, right, here's some of the things that people are saying they'd really like to take away today. And that's in my session, that's in my session, that, so you get a lot of reinforcement. And if there's things that you haven't thought of that people would like to take away, then, you just let that go for a minute. Don't allow that to distract you from what you're actually delivering. Stay confident in what you've put together. And, another thing that's really key is when you start a Zoom session, if you have prepared properly, and I talk about this in other podcasts about, the 5 Ps, prior preparation prevents poor performance. And I've used that all of my training career. When you are prepared, you have a far better session than when you haven't prepared. When you're winging it, that's going to show. So you want to make sure that you've prepared for your session. So when people come up with takeaways, don't allow that to take you away from what you've prepared. And I can tell you that if that distracts you from what you've prepared, I don't think you're prepared enough, but I won't hold you to that. So the other thing too is to be a facilitator, not a broadcaster. You're a facilitator of learning. So the difference is a broadcaster delivers content to people, and a facilitator creates conditions for learning to happen. All right. So you want to create the opportunity for learning to occur. All right. And you know what the difference is. So whether you are living it on Zoom, are you facilitating, opening up the learning? That's the question you want to ask yourself. And if that's not what you're doing, then there's some adjustments that you can make to make sure that you are facilitating learning, not just broadcasting information. And, when people go on lives, when people are, where there is no interaction, they are broadcasting information. But as a trainer assessor, as a facilitator, you are facilitating learning, and you want to make sure that that occurs. And when you get feedback from people, that's a really clear sign whether you've succeeded in that mission. All right. So feedback, never be afraid of feedback. That is one of your most powerful tools. And you know what? You have to be prepared for constructive feedback. I'll tell you a funny story. When you're delivering training and it's face to face and you're there for the full day. If you're providing food, I tell you what, if food doesn't hit the mark, that feedback is always going to be off. And that's been my experience for over 2 decades. So Zoom didn't change the fundamentals of facilitation. It actually just made it easier for you to hide behind your slides. So don't be guilty of that. Don't hide behind slides. You want to make sure that your slides are, again, talking points, not the opportunity for you to read word for word. So again, prior preparation prevents poor performance, making sure your slides match what you're facilitating, but don't use them as a crutch. You want to make sure that you're authentically delivering. So let me just recap for you a few points. So the first 5 minutes set the stage for everything, right? You're the facilitator here. So you're the one who's able to keep control of things. You're able to say where you can turn your camera on. Please tell me where you're calling in from. Write it in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. And also, what's a takeaway that you would like? All right. And that's why are you here? What's something that you'd like to get from this? And you're the facilitator, not the broadcaster. So facilitate learning and don't use Zoom as an excuse to do what we call death by PowerPoint. All right. You don't want to read PowerPoint text. You want to have that as your talking points. And also remember that you've got your auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learners. So make sure that you are facilitating to enhance those experiences for all different learning styles. All right. So if this resonates with you, if you really found some value in this short podcast that I've just given you, I'd love it if you could jump over to the Trainer's Edge on the school community. It's a community for trainers and assessors and facilitators who want to keep growing. The link is going to be in the show notes, so I'll hope to see you over there. There's some great resources popping up on there. They're all free. The community is free, so I look forward to seeing you over there. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who you think might get value from it. And until next time, I look forward to connecting with you again. Bye for now.